Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into a truly prophetic work from the late 1970s, updated right around 1982. It's Bertram Gross's Friendly Fascism, the new face of power in America.
It's one of those books that, once you read it, it forces you to reconsider pretty much everything you thought you knew about how power centralizes.
It really does.
And the core question Gross tackles is so fundamental and frankly so relevant today. He asks, how does a form of subtle authoritarian power take root and, flourish in a modern, technologically advanced constitutional republic like the United States?
Right. And his immediate answer, which really sets the stage for the whole book, is that if you are waiting for a repeat of 1930s Germany or Italy,
You'll miss it.
you will miss the shift entirely.
Absolutely. He argues that modern, concentrated control doesn't require the visible, overt terror.
The mass rallies, the black shirts.
All of that. Or the charismatic demagogues like Hitler or Mussolini that we associate with classic fascism.
He felt those tactics were, for lack of a better word, obsolete. Technologically and ideologically obsolete for the complexities of late 20th century American capitalism.
Instead, the new despotism is subtle. It's gradual. And what's really unsettling is it's dangerously well-mannered.
Friendly.
It's friendly. It wears this amiable face, wrapped in the symbols of constitutionality, efficiency, and just relentless public relations. It doesn't scream at you.
It smiles.
It smiles, and it rationalizes itself as necessary.
So what we're tracking here isn't a sudden traumatic coup. We're looking at a systems-level, gradual erosion of democratic norms.
And an integration of private and public power that is almost impossible to perceive until the process is, until it's already advanced.
Exactly.
So our mission in this deep dive is to calmly and analytically explore the systemic mechanisms, the institutional drift, and the logic that Gross outlined.
Right. We want to focus on how these systems produce outcomes. How does integration, technology, and ideology all work together?
Rather than getting caught up in assigning partisan blame to any single political faction, we're here to understand the machinery.
Yeah, to understand the machinery.
So to really appreciate the argument, we have to talk about the author and the era.
We do. Bertram Gross was a major figure in American political economy. I mean, he wasn't some outside radical. He was an insider.
Right.
He was known for these foundational works like the legislative struggle and his pioneering concept of social systems accounting.
Which was basically an attempt to create quantifiable ways to hold huge government and corporate institutions accountable.
That's it, exactly. So he had deep, deep experience examining the state of the nation from the inside out.
And the historical environment. I mean, the book was updated in the early 1980s. That was a time of just profound structural stress.
Oh, absolutely. This was the post-Vietnam, post-Watergate era. It was marked by global economic upheaval. You had stagflation, deep recessions.
The energy crises.
Right, the energy crises, and this general feeling that American global economic dominance was, in decline.
It was a moment where the system was under really severe pressure.
It was. And Gross observed the rise of the new right, neoconservatism, and increased militarism. But he saw these not as the cause of the shift.
But as symptoms.
Exactly. Symptoms of America trying to cope with the unintended, maybe inevitable consequences of its own advanced capitalist success. The system needed a way to rationalize and manage all these crises.
And that really brings us back to why he thought classic fascism was obsolete.
Yeah. Gross noted that the Axis powers, they relied on extreme militarism, overt repression, and this myth of a single charismatic leader.
Right, like Mussolini talking about the state as a violin in the hands of a maestro.
A perfect example. That's a highly centralized, very visible command structure. And that model just doesn't work for the complexity of the transnational industrial and financial world of the 1980s, let alone today.
It's too clunky.
Way too clunky. The modern form of oligarchy, Gross argued, would be faceless. It would be decentralized and functional. It works not through charisma, but through complexity.
So it avoids the visible seizure of the state.
Right. It opts instead for a deep, quiet integration of big business and big government.
And that integration, it uses sophisticated technology, managed incentives, and ideological control to maintain its power.
And it's often secured not through a violent takeover, but through the quiet apathy, or even the tacit consent of the population.
So the control mechanisms are fundamentally psychological and economic.
Not purely physical.
Right.
So if we try to, boil his central thesis down into plain language, it would be something like this. the maturation of advanced capitalism.
Oh, well,
It inevitably drives society toward a concentrated big government partnership.
this new despotism, what he called friendly fascism.
Right. And it maintains its power through the incremental, often unnoticed, erosion of constitutional democracy. It makes these inherently authoritarian controls appear like technical necessities.
Or just inevitable economic common sense.
Exactly.
And Gross found what he thought was the perfect illustration for this at the very moment he was updating the book.
He did. He pointed to the image of Ronald Reagan, this seemingly benign, smiling, almost grandfatherly figure, calming his audience with what Gross called these sweet inversions of the truth.
He argued this whole persona was perfectly tailored to the image of a friendly fascist.
And the irony, of course, was that this amiable image masked a regime that was simultaneously enacting policies that were highly punitive.
Like what, specifically?
Well, depressing real wages, launching what he called savage assaults on organized labor, deeply cutting social programs, and challenging civil rights and liberties across the board.
So Gross noticed that the president reserved all the attractive, friendly functions for himself.
He did. While his less visible entourage, they handled the ugly jobs of structural repression and, wealth transfer.
That is the core warning, isn't it? The evil, as he put it, now wears a friendlier face than ever before in American history.
It's a system designed to keep you focused on the personality, the charm, the nice guy.
While the underlying mechanics of power concentration are just running at full speed in the background, completely unchallenged.
That's the danger.
Okay, so let's move past that facade and look at the actual gears of the system Gross mapped out, starting with what he called the mysterious establishment.
Yes. This term is so crucial because it immediately pushes back against the idea of some simple, nefarious conspiracy meeting in a basement somewhere.
Right, it's not a secret cabal.
No.
No.
Gross's mysterious establishment is the concentrated wealth and power structure at the very apex of the U.S. system. He says it's hidden, veiled in mist and darkness, not because it's secret.
But because it's so complex.
It's so complex and interconnected that it acts like a moving target. It's just difficult to grasp or hold accountable.
So it's not unified by some single grand plan.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's unified by a shared necessity. And that necessity is maintaining central capitalist values and accumulating wealth. Even if that means shifting coalitions, internal conflicts, and endless bargains and adjustments among all the major players.
Okay, and he identified three main layers, the new lords of this establishment.
Yes, interdependent but functionally distinct. We start at the top. The true source of structural power, the ultra-rich.
And who are these people, functionally speaking? How does he define them?
Well, these are the owners. They own the wealth, and they exercise power either directly or indirectly. And Gross had this brilliant way of describing their scale.
How so?
He says they are so rich they cannot possibly calculate the present market value of their real estate, stocks, art, or jewelry collections. They're literally spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just on experts to manage their financial statements.
So the insight there is that their wealth isn't just large, it's structural.
Exactly. It exists beyond liquid calculation and conventional accountability. It's what grants them immunity from standard market forces and often aggressive taxation.
They own the game board itself.
They do, which leads perfectly to the second tier, the corporate overseers.
So if the ultra-rich are the owners, these are the operators?
The operators, the high priests of accumulation, they are the hired executives and managers of the immense transnational corporations. Think Exxon, General Motors, AT&T, and the vast financial institutions.
So these overseers, they control capital and they command markets all over the world. But their power is, what, contingent?
Absolutely. Their immense status is derived from their service to their superiors, the ultra-rich. They have huge discretion in day-to-day operations, but they can be and are ruthlessly fired if they fail to accumulate capital.
Their ultimate loyalty is to profit.
Their ultimate non-negotiable loyalty is to the accumulation of power and profit.
And then there's the third layer, which connects this private wealth to the actual levers of public action.
Yes, the chief executive network. This includes the president and the many powerful, often opaque agencies within the executive office. Gross observed this very strong trend of increasing integration between top business leaders and these government entities.
Let's pause there for a second because we need to define those key agencies. Their power is vast. He lists the National Security Council, the NSC,
Right, which coordinates foreign policy.
The Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, which controls the entire federal budget and regulatory apparatus.
And the Council of Economic Advisors, the CEA?
So why is their integration with business leaders so critical in his view?
Because they possess the budget levers, the regulatory authority, and the strategic planning mechanisms of the entire federal government. And the goal of this integration, Gross noted, was subtle but absolute,
Which was?
accepting the idea that higher business profits are, in fact, the central purpose of domestic public policy. When the OMB is staffed by executives who see their mission as serving corporate growth, the mechanism for friendly fascism is, well, it's fully engaged.
That dynamic takes us right into the second core idea, which is that friendly fascism is driven by what he calls the logic of adaptation.
Right. And this is so important. It isn't presented as some sudden malevolent decision by a shadowy group.
Yeah.
It's a system's slow, rational, and adaptive response to recurring crises, whether they're economic, social, or global.
To ensure its own survival, the system adapts, and it often overrides its own previous ideological commitment.
Yes. Gross used the historical example of the expanded welfare state. Many traditional capitalists, they fundamentally opposed welfare. They saw it as a drag on the market.
But it was adopted and sustained anyway, despite that opposition.
Precisely, because it proved to be a highly effective mechanism for system stabilization. It put a floor under market demand, which prevented catastrophic collapses, and, crucially, it contained potentially radical anti-capitalist movements.
By addressing some of the worst social pressures.
Right. It was a structural necessity for long-term stability. And it proves that system survival supersedes any kind of dogmatic purity.
So the system operates not randomly, but according to an unfolding logic.
An unfolding logic, which means every crisis, whether it's stagflation, a pandemic, a housing bubble, whatever it is,
It becomes an opportunity.
it becomes an opportunity for greater integration and centralized control, all in the name of system survival. And this is often formulated by these sophisticated, interconnected groups.
And this unfolding logic involves hundreds of plans and commissions, some visible, some secret.
Policy formulators, think tanks, all working diligently to consolidate oligarchic power and adjust to global challenges. And the groups doing the adjusting, they often include those from that third layer we just discussed, the chief executive network.
Seamlessly transitioning between public and private sectors.
You've got it.
The third insight then deals with how this power is expressed, leading to the threat of creeping despotism or the friendly face.
Yeah. So if classic fascism relied on terror and mobilization, how does this creeping despotism maintain control?
Through subtle manipulation.
And a determined effort to maintain the image of legitimacy. The power structure carefully insists it is fully subservient to law and morality.
While at the same time subverting the spirit of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
It's a genius maneuver, really. It uses the trappings of constitutionality, the courts, the elections, the public debates, to justify actions that are, in effect, above the law and beyond public accountability.
It's that amiable dunce image Gross mentioned in the preface, the charming distraction. You're arguing about the president's tweets or demeanor,
Right.
while the underlying mechanisms of wealth consolidation and structural repression are efficiently operating, often in the background, handled by that less visible, less charming entourage he described.
That's it, exactly. The difficulty is in focusing attention on the actual forces behind the establishment when the foreground is just dominated by this curated performance of benignity or common sense.
The soft repression is just so much more efficient than the Gestapo.
Because it relies on co-option and misdirection. It makes people participate in their own control.
Finally, we need to spend some time detailing what he called the 5 columns against democracy. He borrowed this concept from the Spanish Civil War.
He did, describing 5 simultaneous forces advancing against U.S. democratic institutions. 4 of them are visible, 1 is invisible.
So what are the first 4 visible columns?
They're the shock troops, a motley collection of fanatical groups. He lists the moral majority zealots, whipping up militarism and cultural conservatism.
The Klan and American Nazis stirring up racism and anti-Semitism.
The right-to-life campaigners, focusing on specific moral political conflicts. And what he called the suicide squadron, the militarists pushing for foreign intervention and constant warmongering.
But the key insight here, which I think is often missed, is their functional role in the system.
Absolutely. Gross argued these groups are essential not because they hold the real power, but because they are excellent distractions.
They focus public attention on convenient scapegoats.
Blacks, Hispanics, feminists, anti-war people. anyone, really. And they promote these divisive cultural tensions among the low and middle-income majority.
So by driving this cultural and moral warfare, they distract people from the structural economic inequalities.
Exactly. People are fighting each other over abortion or prayer in schools, while tax loopholes and regulatory capture are proceeding smoothly in the background, completely untouched.
And that takes us to the most subtle and pervasive threat, the fifth column, which is inside our minds.
Yes. This column is composed of the ruling myths and ideologies, the very air we breathe that camouflage, encourage, and legitimate the other four columns. Without this ideological foundation, the open displays of fanaticism would either collapse or just be rejected by the majority.
So his analysis here suggests that the most dangerous authoritarianism, it doesn't look like an invader from the outside.
No, it looks exactly like the values we already hold dear: efficiency, economic growth, technological progress, and patriotism.
Okay, so now let's move into the actual architecture of this. The operational reality, starting with the most explicit connections, corporate government partnerships.
This is the nexus of power. Gross defines the relationship as a business-government partnership, with business often serving as the senior, although sometimes silent, partner.
So it's an arrangement where government and business manage the system together, but the ultimate priority is always the profit motive of the corporation.
That's right. The partnership ensures that even when the government intervenes, the intervention primarily serves to stabilize or subsidize private enterprise.
And we often talk about the military-industrial complex as one famous example, but Gross argued this was just one node in a much larger interconnected web.
A web of complexes, he called it, knitting together the entire free world empire.
The scale is immense.
It is. Think about it. He detailed the existence of the nuclear power complex, the technology science complex, the energy auto highway complex.
The banking investment housing complex, the agribusiness complex.
Exactly. These systems, they transcend mere national boundaries. They're concretized globally. They manage fundamental necessities: where our food comes from, how we travel, where we live, how we manage energy.
Let's make that tangible for a second. The agribusiness complex, this isn't just a collection of small farms.
Not even close. It's the massive integration of seed and fertilizer companies, large-scale processors, global distribution networks, and the federal agencies that regulate land use, subsidies, and export policies.
And when that complex works seamlessly, it ensures food stability.
But it also concentrates land ownership and dictates policy, often to the detriment of smaller players or, environmental concerns.
Which leads directly to what Ralph Nader observed and what Gross called welfare for big business.
Yes. The idea that the federal government is just replete with these support programs. And these aren't trivial favors. They're massive subsidies, research grants, multi-year contracts, and tax privileges that flow regularly into the corporate mission of profit and sales maximization.
These supports are basically the lifeblood of oligarchic power.
They are. They maintain the power of utilities, major transportation interests, communication media, all through what are euphemistically called regulatory commissions.
So in this context, government intervention often isn't about curbing capitalism.
It's about socializing risk and subsidizing private firms, using public credit policies or subsidized research, for instance, to promote capitalist enterprises.
And the scale and global nature of this operation, it demands immense coordination.
It does. Which brings us to concentrated wealth and elite coordination, what Gross called the trilateral world.
He described a shift away from competing regional elites, like the historical Eastern establishment,
to an increasingly global financial, business, and political oligarchy. And they're unified by this central necessity of maintaining the system's core values against global stress.
And the institutional structure that facilitates this is exemplified by the Trilateral Commission.
Exactly. Created by David Rockefeller and other banking leaders. And it wasn't a governmental body. It was an organization of prominent citizens, business leaders, academics, politicians from North America, Japan, and Western Europe.
Its purpose was explicit, wasn't it?
Very explicit. To discuss high-level strategy on monetary policy, energy, trade, and development. Basically, to formulate strategy for the first world's establishments. It's a mechanism for non-governmental, deep-level coordination across sovereign states.
To ensure that core values and macro policy goals remain aligned, regardless of who's in power in any one member country. Now, managing this complex, coordinated, transnational structure, it requires a very specialized type of management.
It does. Which brings us to technocratic governance and knowledge elites. Gross analyzed the rise of what Daniel Bill called knowledge elites and what John Kenneth Galbraith called the technostructure.
This vast array of experts, systems analysts, and academics hired to provide the guiding intelligence for large-scale corporate and federal action.
And the crucial, subtle shift here is the replacement of moral or political analysis with technical expertise. The traditional dominance of economists, for example, was challenged by behavioral scientists, computer scientists, systems analysts.
And this technocratic focus encourages what Gross called iconoclastic conformity.
That's a fascinating phrase.
It is. What does iconoclastic conformity mean in practice?
It means establishing technical solutions for what are actually political, moral, and socioeconomic problems. It serves to depoliticize issues.
So instead of having a public political debate over whether a social program should exist or whether income inequality should be addressed.
Which is a moral or political question.
Right. The debate gets shifted to how to best optimize the algorithm for means testing, or how to best calculate the politically tolerable unemployment rate.
The purely technical question.
If you can turn a moral or political failure into an Excel problem, you've essentially defanged all systemic criticism.
You have. And the intellectual class, as Irving Kristol noted during that time, refused to accept political responsibility. This led to a new class of neoconservatives and these powerful corporate-funded think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, providing sophisticated justifications for hierarchy and central power.
And these think tanks, they serve to transmit the core ideology.
Creating a brain-for-hire market where specialists compete to carve out an ecological niche for themselves rather than, pursuing objective truth. Their competition is often about who can best justify the existing power structure in the language of efficiency and economic growth.
And this intellectual management is a crucial operation of the ideological fifth column.
Absolutely. Which leads us to surveillance and information management. Gross detailed three major ideological prongs used to manage minds and maintain conformity.
The first, and most pervasive at the time, was anti-communism, anti-socialism.
Right. This served as the primary rationale for global expansion, for militarism, for restricting welfare spending. It was this vast, adaptable ideological menu that offered something for almost any taste, providing a constant warning against any fundamental tinkering with the American system.
And the second prong?
Corporate soulfulness. These are the relentless PR campaigns designed to promote the idea that the modern corporation is a soulful corporation, devoted to public interest, community welfare, environmental stewardship.
A carefully crafted image that serves to hide the reality of private greed behind free market imagery.
Exactly. And third, the quiet but audacious assertion that capitalism is dead.
How does that one work?
The tacit claim is that we no longer operate under a profit-driven capitalist system. Instead, it's a neutral, benign, mixed economy, or a technostructure. This renders systemic analysis unfashionable, effectively ruling out any fundamental critique of the system itself.
But the surveillance Gross warned about wasn't purely ideological, was it?
No, not at all. He detailed the perpetual state of physical surveillance and dossier building necessary to enforce this ideological conformity. He noted an estimation that at least 8 million Americans, and up to 20 million including their families, were subject to investigative procedures at any given time.
And this perpetual monitoring, combined with historical examples like the post-war purges and the anti-communist movements,
It served an essential function, purifying thought and behavior within the establishment and channeling popular resentments into harmless, often commercially profitable ways.
which feeds directly into political apathy and managed consent, what Gross termed the side effects of success.
Right. Advanced capitalism, he noted, naturally nurtures this deep social malaise, a feeling that life is empty of the kind of purpose and effort that gives to life its flavor.
And this malaise is profoundly structural. It's not a personal failing.
Not at all. It's rooted in social fragmentation, the loss of community, the decline of cohesive social units, the rise of modern nomads, constant migration, long commuting times, the fragmentation of work itself.
Where mental labor is broken down into smaller, isolated parts.
It all contributes to isolation and makes people easier to regiment.
He has these quotes from workers across the board, from blue collar to white collar, feeling reduced to cogs.
Using these defeatist phrases like, "I'm a robot," or the young accountant who lamented there's just nothing to talk about politically or socially that feels meaningful.
That feeling of powerlessness, that vast constitutional amassments seem beyond control and comprehension, it leads to rational withdrawal.
Yes. Fear of future despotism or change is repressed, leading to an apathy that immobilizes people rather than motivating them to control the system's dangers. The system functions precisely because the constitutional masses feel overwhelmed.
And finally, Gross details the incremental erosion of constitutional democracy, how power expands without overt, visible repression, which is why it's so insidious.
And this is achieved through these clever legal and executive mechanisms. He gives examples like judicial sidetracking,
What's that?
the massive use of plea bargaining in criminal cases, which completely bypasses the right to a jury trial, and the use of rent-a-judge schemes in civil cases for the wealthy. And then there's executive usurpation.
Where executive power expands by using national crises, real or manufactured, to justify authoritarian controls.
Right. And militaristic discipline. Gross cited draft registration and expanded arms exports as 80s examples, and the expansion of presidential regulation threatening constitutional amendments.
The core danger here is the slow process.
It's the slow process. Gross stressed he had almost no faith in sudden ruin. Fundamental change is so easily dismissed or unnoticed by the majority until you can apply hindsight.
And by then?
By that time, the new serfdom might have long since arrived. The system accrues power one seemingly necessary regulation, one tax break, one executive order at a time.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener today, decades after Gross wrote this. He was observing stagflation, the Cold War hawks, the rise of personal computing. But here's where it gets really interesting. How do these patterns manifest in our present day, in the age of the internet and global finance?
Well, if we look at the establishment Gross described, his concept of contemporary corporate influence and regulatory capture hasn't just continued, it is dramatically accelerated because of globalization.
The ultra-rich and corporate overseers now form a truly globalized golden international.
Exactly. Transnational corporations that move flexibly across borders. They are masters at playing national currencies and governments against each other.
Shifting assets and production to escape.
What taxes? Taxes, regulations on currency, credit, trade. This makes national governments often feel secondary to the mobility of global capital.
And the integration of the ultra-rich and corporate overseers into the chief executive network, that revolving door, it feels constant now.
It is. It makes the boundary between public service and private profit almost entirely meaningless at the highest levels. Gross's mention of regulatory commissions maintaining the oligarchic power of major interests, telecoms, banks, utilities, is profoundly relevant today.
It suggests that structural capture just maintains power regardless of which political party is in control. But the most dramatic fulfillment of Gross's warnings has to be in surveillance capitalism and information management.
Oh, without a doubt. Gross warned that new technologies would be used for personal surveillance and dossier building, for collecting, transforming, storing, and moving information to distill new power or capital.
In the 1980s, that meant physical dossiers and investigative procedures for maybe 8 million people.
Today, we have seen an exponential, frankly unimaginable expansion of high-technology monitoring over virtually every individual. We are talking about algorithms that track every click, every communication, every purchase to compile massive personal dossiers.
For predictive behavioral advertising and, critically, for political and social control.
That information is the new power or capital Gross anticipated. It's used not just by governments, but by private technology companies to segment, manage, and influence populations.
And the ideological prongs have just been updated.
They've just been updated. Anti-communism is replaced by constant appeals to national security, counterterrorism, and anti-foreign interference to justify expanded state surveillance powers.
Meanwhile, the myth of corporate soulfulness, now framed through social impact initiatives and diversity metrics, and the capitalism is dead myth, they persist.
Protecting the core profit-seeking mechanisms from any systemic critique. The information ecosystem itself is the fifth column operating inside our minds, constantly shaping the narrative.
We also see the continuation of declining civic participation and the contingent members.
Yes. Gross noted that the lower levels of the establishment, government, employees, union leaders, academics reliant on corporate funding are junior and contingent members.
And their meaningful participation depends entirely on their continued good behavior.
It's a mechanism that co-opts potential institutional resistance before it can even start.
And among the general public, the apathy loop is just amplified by the sheer volume of information.
And the structural factors. Gross cited fragmentation of labor, geographic mobility. They continue to isolate people.
Right.
Large numbers of people consistently fail to vote, which indicates a withdrawal of commitment.
The political system seems to rely on this detachment.
It does. If the constitutional masses felt they had comprehension or control, the system would destabilize.
Finally, the concept of the normalization of emergency governance, that logic of crisis, is perhaps the most resonant modern pattern.
It really is.
Yeah.
Gross wrote about using constant crises, untamed recession, stagflation, to keep wages depressed, cut social expenditures, and promote the austerity bandwagon as a national virtue.
This logic dictates that the system must continually redefine what full employment even means.
Exactly. In the 1940s, 2–3% unemployment was the goal. By the 1980s, it was 6% or higher. The system uses periods of high unemployment to impose structural change, to force workers to adapt, and to increase productivity in plants by making workers fearful of losing their jobs.
And in our modern context, we've seen financial crashes, global pandemics, climate events, all used to justify massive injections of state capital
Often channeled through the corporate overseers.
and to increase centralized executive control, all in the name of technical necessity and rapid response.
The underlying principle is exactly the same. Crises are opportunities to rationalize and implement tighter controls and austerity measures on the public, while consolidating power and wealth at the top.
So if we connect Gross's analysis to the broader systems that shape our world, his work illuminates several core themes that really define this crisis in perception.
It does. And I think the most challenging of these is recognizing power without visible villains.
What do you mean by that?
Gross makes it exceptionally clear that the power structure is managed by faceless oligarchs who are shielded from accountability by layers of corporate structure and regulatory capture. The ultra-rich and the corporate overseers are rarely exposed to public scrutiny.
He pointed out that top political leaders, even presidents, are often just fall guys.
They are. They're susceptible to summary dismissal when policy errors occur. Meanwhile, the ultra-rich reap the long-term financial benefits of this trial-and-error learning, completely shielded from the political consequences.
So the true danger is not the rabid crackpots, the visible fringe, but the well-dressed, well-educated activists who hide their extremism and ideological commitments under a cloak of educated respectability.
And data-driven efficiency.
Right. And this faceless control also succeeds because it relies so heavily on control through incentives rather than fear.
Absolutely. While the state always maintains the capacity for repression, the system doesn't rely solely on high-cost, inefficient, Gestapo-style terror.
Instead, control operates through what he called rationed rewards.
High consumption, professional status, upward mobility for the faithful. It also utilizes media-subsidized escape, the endless flow of entertainment, excitement, sexual fulfillment, to fragment our attention and satisfy base desires.
So the system essentially trades the psychological cost of powerlessness and fragmentation
for a steady stream of conditional rewards and distractions.
It's the ultimate co-option mechanism, giving people just enough material stability and psychological distraction to ensure they never organize or even notice a structural erosion of their rights.
This immobilization achieves control far more effectively than overt repression ever could.
And finally, this is why authoritarianism often looks reasonable.
Yes. The new regime requires legitimacy. It requires righteousness. Power is gained by making inherently authoritarian measures. The austerity, the cutting of social services, the centralization of executive power look like technical or economic common sense.
They promote these new ideologies of central power that emphasize the excellence of hierarchy and the supposed goodness of hard times needed to right the economy.
And by constantly framing political problems as technical difficulties that require expert management, they depoliticize dissent and reinforce institutional control, all while maintaining a pleasant, friendly face.
This book, written 4 decades ago, it just forces us to look beyond the superficial political conflicts reported in the news.
Really got it.
It suggests that modern power is fundamentally adaptive, transnational, and relies on these structural mechanisms: corporate integration, technocratic management, and sophisticated control over ideology to centralize authority.
What Gross helps us see differently is that the dominant logic of friendly fascism isn't some historical accident or a temporary deviation. It is the calculated structural result of advanced capitalism's attempt to survive its own inherent contradictions.
The need to maximize profit while simultaneously managing the social and political fallout of that maximization.
Right. Every structural crisis becomes a perfectly rational justification for tighter control.
And this illuminates precisely why freedom can erode so quietly. Gross warned that the ruin of the American dream would not come with a sudden dramatic collapse or a bang,
but through a slow, incremental, nearly invisible process.
Because the changes are so gradual, they're easily unnoticed by the majority until it's too late. Hindsight, he noted, is 20/20 on fundamental change.
But by that time, the new serfdom might have long since arrived.
So this profound structural challenge means that vigilance, as Gross defined it, borrowing from that warning that power is always gradually stealing away from the many to the few, because the few are more vigilant and consistent.
That vigilance requires constant, active effort to monitor and hold these complex institutions accountable. It requires us to move past the friendly facade, to question the rhetoric of technical necessity.
And to continually challenge the ruling myths that disguise private greed in the language of efficiency and free markets.
The ultimate problem, Gross concluded, is not in external threats or obvious symbols. It's in ourselves and how we fail to clarify our usage and fail to organize resistance.
So if this logic of tighter integration, information management, and concentrated control continues to unfold across the globe, the provocative thought Gross leaves us with is this. What new forms of collective action or new styles of planning styles that move beyond the corporate-state dichotomy must be developed today to counter the ongoing maturation of modern capitalism's most dangerous potentials? This deep dive was inspired by the work of Bertram Gross and his book, Friendly Fascism, The New Face of Power in America.
We encourage you to read the book yourself, support the author if you found the ideas valuable, or check your local library for free access.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.